It kind of feels like the whole thing's been a journey for you.
Yeah, it has. It has. It's been, yeah.
Talk to me about that journey. I mean, this is so cool. Let's start with this.
Yeah.
It is so incredibly cool that you have the rights back to your film and you're re-releasing it.
Yeah. I mean, it's been sort of part and parcel of the entire journey itself. I mean, we started this trip, obviously, in the making of the film, but it wasn't an obvious movie to try to sell to a studio, and it wasn't an obvious movie to try to sell to an audience. And so in 2011, I had this crazy idea to put the poster, sort of shrink wrap a tour bus with the poster of the film, load my dad on it, and do a tour. And so we did. And we started on the West Coast and worked our way east, and we visited 35 cities in 50 days. We slept on the bus, ate on the bus, did a lot of our interviews from the bus. We'd bring journalists on the bus, we'd take them to the next town, next city. When we were in Dayton, Kristen Schlottman came and sort of, she bum rushed me, and she'll tell you the same story. She said, "Will you please bring the movie to Cincinnati?" And I said, "Well, we have our tour all sort of mapped out." She says, "Please bring it to Cincy. I'd love to show you what we can do here in Cincy in terms of what we offer film and your next movie." And so, okay. So our last stop was here in Cincy. And we came down from Indiana. We were at the Heartland Film Festival. And so it was a pretty straight shot. Stayed at the Cincinnatian Hotel. The bus was parked out in front. It left. And I stayed here with my son for 3 days. And I started to fall in love with Cincinnati. And that was sort of the beginning of my next pilgrimage, sort of here, the next part of this whole journey here. And I've since become a resident. This is my adopted city. And we've been talking almost as long. Yeah. I think you were the first interview I did in town. This was, I'm going to say, goes back 2013.
I remember that interview because I think it was about a movie that never has happened.
That's right. And again, I just love the fact that it was the end of the tour, and then we're sort of, again, revisiting it, and here we are. And people are going to see it again because a lot of people didn't see it when it first came out.
Yet, people did. And it has inspired, I mean, is it fair to say that it has inspired tens of thousands of people to walk the El Camino?
Yeah, maybe more. I mean, if you think globally, it's tens of thousands from the United States alone. But globally, this movie has just had this amazing reach. It has inspired people. And again, I may never do another movie that actually inspires people to watch a film, get up off their couch, and then travel to Spain and walk 500 miles. I mean, what movie that you can think of in recent memory have you seen that has inspired people to do that? So I feel very blessed to have had that impact. And we get the feedback from whether it's snail mail or DMs or emails and saying, "Your movie changed my life. Thank you for making it. Your movie changed my life." And that's rare.
How does it feel?
It's very special. It's very special because, and a lot of that makes me feel a little less crazy, because when you're pitching a movie like this, or when you're trying to sell a movie like this, or when you're trying to beg audiences to come and see it, you start to question yourself. You start to say, am I the only one who sees this? And if I am, well, then what's wrong with me? And now other people see it, and now they're inspired, and now it's like, okay, I'm not as insane as I thought I was. A little insane. Anybody who is in this business, again, if we were sensible people, we would have chosen another profession. That's fine. But so here we are, and I feel a little less crazy.
You're crazy in a good way. I like your kind of crazy.
Thank you. I like that. I like that.
This feels like, this movie, The Way, feels so much like a very personal movie.
Mm-hmm. It is.
To you.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. It's dedicated to my grandfather, Francisco Estevez, who emigrated from Spain. There was right after the Spanish-American War, so there was a quota on Spaniards coming into America. So he went to Cuba, became a Cuban national, and then came in through Miami. He had a dream of being a fruit vendor, a vegetable vendor. He wanted to sell, and he was robbed. He got ripped off. So he heard they were hiring in Dayton, So he took a bus up to Dayton and started working for NCR, National Cash Register. And so the movie has Spanish roots and Ohio roots. He has 10 children here in all over the world, but they raised the family in Dayton. My dad, now in 2003, he decides he's going to go to Spain. He's always wanted to visit the Camino de Santiago, and he'd always wanted to see it because it was close to where my grandfather was born. And so it was hiatus during the West Wing. He takes my son along, who was working as his assistant. They go to Ireland. They take this trip to Spain. They didn't have the time to walk because you need 6-7 weeks to do it. So they had three weeks, and they said, well, let's just drive. We'll rent a car and we'll drive. They stop in a little town called Burgos overnight, where they take in the pilgrims, and it was called the Casa Rural. A young lady walks into the room, and my son meets her and falls in love, comes back to the United States and says, Dad, I'm moving to Spain. So he lived there for 9 years. And in 2009, he marries his now wife, Julia, and it was the same year that we started shooting the film. But during their engagement, I had to go to Spain to spend time with my son. I thought, well, if I want to see him, I should probably figure out how to work here. So I was motivated by that. And then my dad said, well, how about we do a movie in Spain? How about we do a movie on the Camino? And it just kind of evolved from that. And I said, well, I kind of lost my son, not as dark as it happens in the movie, but I kind of lost my son in Spain. How can I sort of take the germ of that story and create something else? And so I did. And so that was sort of how it all came together. It pays homage to my grandfather, it pays tribute to my son, and it also stars my father. So it's like got this generational thing, and I'm just kind of, yes, I directed, yes, I wrote it, but I also had the good sense to sort of get out of my own way, right?
Is that hard?
Of course it is. Yes, it is hard to sometimes get out of your own way. It is hard to sort of not be your own worst enemy. And I think for me, there is so much of what we think we want to be in control. We think we're the masters of our future, we're master of our destiny. Well, we are to a certain extent, but we're not to a greater extent. And so I think that's also part of it for me, is sort of getting out of my own way.
Well, you had to get in your dad's way a little.
I did.
How was that? Well, I mean, when you look back on it, what do you take away from directing your dad in such a very personal way?
He is, talk about getting in your own way, but where I hate to use the word fought, but where I, came to some loggerheads with him was he wanted to be himself. If you've met my dad, he's never met a stranger. So he likes to be out in the world, he likes to shake everybody's hand, he likes to meet everyone. Hey, how you doing, where are you from? Tom, the character he's playing in the movie, is not that guy. He's the country club guy. He's isolated. He lives in his own world. He's very cozy. He lives in his comfort zone. And he's not very friendly. And my dad is, as I said, a very friendly guy. So for me, I had to have him pull back from being Martin and have him be more Tom.
So you had to restrain your dad.
From his own better angel, which again went against every fiber of his being. Again, you Midwest guy, it's friendly to everyone. It's like he's that guy. So in the movie he's not, but that was a feat of directing and really staying on him and making sure that he stayed in character.
Look, my kids give me hell all the time, poke at me and all that stuff.
Sure.
But they don't tell me what to do.
Right.
You had to tell him what to do.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, we know where all the buttons are because we helped build the machine, as it were. So for me, it was, I'd tell him what to do, and he also brought a lot to this movie. He had great ideas. Some of them were dangerous, like the idea of the backpack falling into the river. That was his idea. The idea of the kid stealing the backpack. That was his idea. Both required a lot of physicality on his part. And I was like, you're not really an action star, but he's coming up with all these action star type ideas that we then had to execute. And he had to execute by throwing himself in the river. So, he was an integral part of the development of it. So I don't want to take anything away from him in that respect. But sometimes, actors oftentimes only think of the moments of glory. They see themselves at the premiere. They don't necessarily walk through everything that the director walks through, and then the year that you're sitting in the cutting room, they're off making other movies and appearances and this and that. I'm stuck with it. I have to do all of the hard work.
Yeah, you got to create the story.
You have to create the story, exactly.
Why is the way important now?
I think the film is in many ways more important now than when it was originally released in 2012. Coming out of COVID, I think people have this desire not only to travel again, but to be less isolated. We've been so isolated. We've been sort of living in our own tribes, in our own bubbles, even pre-COVID. Coming out of the pandemic, after the mandated isolation, I think people are desperate to get back out in the world. I think they're desperate to get outside of themselves. And I think people are desperate to be in a communal relationship again.
What do you want people? So, to me, there's so many aspects to this movie. Like, in some ways, it's very religious. It's spiritual. Mm-hmm. It's spiritual, right?
Of course.
It's emotional. You said you can't watch it without crying.
No, I stand and I'll introduce the movie at a festival or at a screening and stand in the wings and just start weeping. I'm continually moved by the scenes in the film, and again, I allow myself to grieve. I have allowed myself to grieve. I probably don't cry enough. Probably none of us do. But I think coming out of the pandemic, reconnecting to people. I think the film is really about that. It's about finding community. Tom, the character of Tom, couldn't meet his son halfway. Couldn't meet. We see that in the beginning of the movie. We see the strained relationship between the guy that is pretty much set in his ways and the son who's like willing to throw it all away to see the world. So Tom wasn't able to meet him and find that common ground. Now, after his son's passing, he has to travel all the way, not only to Spain, but all the way to the darkest and deepest parts of himself to meet his son. And that's ultimately what the movie is about. It's about reconnecting with family, reconnecting with the world, and being a citizen of the world again, which is what ultimately Daniel was trying to become.
Is that what makes you emotional? Like knowing the relationship between you and your son and you and your dad? Or what is it? What is it that touches you every time?
Well, I think at first, the fact that the movie got made, right? It's just like, how did this happen? How did this happen? I think that's, and the fact that it's, I think my old man, he's so good in the movie. He's so terrific in the movie, and it's a movie that not enough people have seen, and it's the movie that he's the most proud of, that he claims that in all of his work, it's the most personal and the proudest movie that he's ever done. And so I think as a son's gift to a father, if you could call it that, because again, it's a gift to me as well, I feel like that connection, that if I don't do anything else, if I never help them take their garbage cans out, at least there's this that in evidence that we took the time, that he's terrific in the movie, and that the movie lives well past. I mean, everybody in this movie will people will be watching this well after everybody in the credits are gone, and so it's that kind of movie that will live on.
I agree with you. It's a kind of movie that's like low key, got this incredible following. It's going to always exist because it's inspiring, and it's thoughtful, and it's teaching.
And it was shot by one of our new Cincinnati residents, Juanmi Aspiros, who's our DP. He was a DP on The Public. I said, come to Cincinnati. I'm going to shoot the next film here. He comes to Cincinnati. He falls in love with it. He's put his kids in school, called his wife, says, we're moving out of New York. We're going to move to Cincinnati. And he's made a life for himself. So I'm bringing as many people here to Cincy as I can. I just keep I keep, you know.
It all comes back to Cincinnati.
It
As
does,
we
man.
sit here at
It
French
does.
Crust Cafe, you know, it all comes back to the fact that at some point or another, this is your pivot point in life. I don't know. This is your pivot place.
I don't disagree. It really, it feels like that.
So this will be, is it only in theaters one day?
One day, and then following the theatrical, there'll be a 1 month window where Fathom has it, then it's going to go out through their streaming services. But it will be, and you'll be able to have a theatrical experience at home. But we want people to see this in the theaters. It feels big. You get to sort of spend time in Spain. We encourage you to have a glass or even a bottle of wine before you go in to see it, or a couple. Take some cheese and some ham on. But go and experience the movie in the theater, because again, if you think about on the Camino, you're with other people. You're in a communal setting. That's what the experience of the movie is too. And so to see it in the theater with other people, I think is the best way to see this film, especially after a couple glasses of wine.
Especially. It's important. Rick Steves is at the beginning and the end that you've added this introduction, this epilogue and prologue.
Right.
I think it was really important to include him. And at first I was kind of like, really? Rick Steves? And then I got it. Because of course, Rick Steves.
Yeah.
The whole idea about, you know, busting out of this place and going doing something different.
Yeah, and Rick really stresses that when you travel, the greatest souvenir you bring home is a greater understanding and a broader understanding of other people. We're 5% of the world here in America. When we start going out and we start experiencing what and how the rest of the world lives, you bring that back. You look at your community differently. And my girlfriend Jackie had this crazy idea. She says, let's call Rick. Let's invite him to the process.
It was kind of fascinating. I didn't realize that his dad, you know, he kind of had that same relationship.
That's right. Yeah, his dad took him to the airport, very much in the same way that Tom takes Daniel to the airport, and they had that conversation. And what did his father say to him? Don't be fooled.
Don't be duped.
Don't be duped. Yeah, don't be duped.
Don't be duped.
Interesting.
All right, so we're all going to we're going to go watch The Way. We're going to take it home with us, and then you're going to shoot a sequel.
That's the idea. Unfortunately, we can't shoot it in Cincinnati because it takes place in Europe.
Where are we going to next?
But maybe I can cut it here.
That'd be good.
So part 2 opens in Nigeria. We've picked up Tom. He is now working with Doctors Without Borders. He's, we know from the movie, he's an ophthalmologist. He is performing cataract surgeries in a very remote village in northern Nigeria. Where it's so remote that they're really cut off from the rest of the world. Mail comes via a cargo drop. He gets the mail, he tears it open, and inside the mail, a pouch, is the book that the Irishman wrote about their time in the Camino, which is in itself interesting. What's in the book and what's revealed in the book was something that we didn't reveal in the movie. And that prompts Tom to pack up, leave Nigeria, and go to Dublin to try to track him down, to answer some of these questions in the book. And that is the beginning of the next journey. And so we start in Nigeria, we go to Dublin, Amsterdam, Brussels, Paris, and then back to Spain.
Whole cast back?
Most of us, yeah. Yeah, and you're gonna see flashbacks of Daniel, so I'll be a bigger part. And again, I don't wanna give anything away, but there's some, what we reveal in the book yes. Anyway, that's all I can say now. But it's a fascinating story, and again, we'll shoot in the north. We'll shoot on a different Camino because the one now is so crowded. You can't, thanks to the movie, in part. But people are complaining about what the movie has done to the Camino Frances, and that you can't get a bed and you can't get a meal, and it's just too crowded. So we'll shoot part 2 in the north.
So there's a northern portion of
There are 5 different Caminos. There's a Portuguese Camino, there's the Camino Frances, there's the Camino Primitivo, there's the Camino del Norte. So they all ultimately go to
5 different films I see here.
There could be. There could be. We'll see. My dad's
Dad better
83.
stay in some
He's
walking
80. I know. He's 83. He looks great. Got great constitution. He's certainly got a lot of energy. So now it's just a question of how fast can I write and how fast we can pull all the funding together.
When does that start? Do you know?
So ideally, we'd like to go in the fall.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's not that far away. But again, I believe that this re-release is going to force people to look at the movie again, look at it differently. And now everybody's so franchise happy. You know, the idea that that there would be another part of this, I think it makes the first movie even more valuable.
My son has said that I should ask this question. I'm not sure if I'm going to phrase it properly, but that there was some like picking at Americans at that we Americans think that we're the greatest, but that from a global perspective in the movie, there was some like, oh, you American, you don't have an opinion, that's amazing, things like that. Was that on purpose?
Well, it's the old joke. What do you call someone who speaks 2 languages? Bilingual.
Yeah.
What do you call somebody who speaks 3 languages?
Multilingual.
Or trilingual. What do you call someone who speaks 1 language?
American.
So that is, and that joke was actually in the movie, but it's an old joke and I cut it. But again, Americans tend to want to bring their culture overseas when they travel rather than being immersed. And I believe that immersive travel is the best travel. And I say that because I've had the luxury of immersive travel, because I did not have the luxury of saying no to travel as a kid. And what I mean by that is that my father insisted that the family travel every time he got a job. So whether it was to La Junta, Colorado, or Rome, or the Philippines, or Mexico, we got in the car, we got on the plane, we got on the train, and we traveled against our will sometimes. We dug in, and we'd live at a place, in a city, a town, for 4 months, 6 months, 5 weeks, whatever it was. We never saw the world as tourists. We always saw the world as people who were dug into a community.
You know, I think it makes me, this is just the Cincinnati girl in me, I guess, but you've traveled the world, and yet you choose to live here. I find that fascinating.
Well, as you know, I've called this the Paris of the Midwest. So I mean, you can't not walk down the street here and not be inspired. I mean, it's like the architecture, the people, the restaurants, the breweries. I mean, it's just like, you can't find that in LA. In New York, you can't find it because you can't move. You can't walk down the street without dodging. Here, it's a great life. They're great people. Everyone is working towards something. It's not, how do I put this? It's really inspired. And so from the very beginning, I thought, my gosh, the potential here, the opportunity here, the fact that as far as a film set, it's like, it's ready to go. Cincinnati's ready for its close-up. It really is. And that's why it was so important for me when we made the public to say we're in Cincinnati. It's not New York, it's not Texas, it's Cincinnati. And put Cincinnati on the map and show what the city looks like, because when people come here and they see it, they see the architecture, and they eat in our restaurants, their minds are blown. Blown. I had a friend of mine who still says, "Say, you gotta, when are you going back to that place, Cantina?" This was last summer. He was like, "That's the best Mexican food I've ever had." So, you know, I can't. I mean, again, I'm a huge cheerleader for this city, and I want to just keep putting the eyeballs and putting the spotlight on as much as I can.